Okay, so we are talking about using the cross-stitch program. And what you see on my screen is a quite blurry picture of a cross-stitch chart. And I have inserted it here because I think that this is going to be one of the main things that I'm going to talk about is the images and image preparation. But first of all, let's take a look at the toolbars, because when you first start a new project, there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. You know that the way that you get here is through your main Hatch program. You come up to the File tab and you come on down to Cross Stitch, and that's what opens the Cross Stitch add-on, which is called Cross Stitch Gem. Looks like I just confused my program. Okay, so I already have my program open for Cross Stitch, and like I said, I have an image inserted here that I'm going to talk about in a little bit. But in order to get prepared for the project, there might be a couple of settings that you might want to start off by adjusting right away. And so in your settings tab, you can come on down and you can choose to change a couple of different things. One of the things that I like to do is change my fabric display to white. The default in the program is a gray, and it is a solid color. I prefer to work on a bright white screen, and so I always like to start off by just adjusting that and saying okay, and then my screen is white. Another thing that I like to do is go ahead and select one of my Janome hoops for my machine. And the way that we do that is we can right click, and you see when I'm hovering over this hoop icon here on the toolbar, it's telling me that I can right click for hoop options, and so I will do that. And when I do, you can see that I've got my hoop square 23 already pre-selected. If you're embroidering on a different machine or want to use a different hoop, there's a huge list of hoops that are available here. What I will tell you is that the default hoop that will come up on the machines on the screen, is going to be one of the Bernina hoops, and so you can select your own hoop here for the machine and the size of hoop that you want. I do like to start off there. It does not mean that we have to stay with this same size hoop, because later on in the process of creating our design and saving our design, we might find that we want to use a different sized hoop that's more appropriate for our project that we're actually working on. But right now I'm just going to stay with square 23 with a white background, and right now you'll notice that I do not have the grid turned on. This is the icon for the grid. We can adjust the settings for the grid also, again by right clicking on it, or even that opens up this options screen, and when we open up the options screen, we've got 3 different categories of things that we are able to change. One of them is the grid size. If you're familiar with embroidery cross-stitch charts, you're going to remember that they generally are divided up with 10 crosses per block. And so I do like to keep mine set for the 10 crosses, but if you want to change it for some reason, you are able to do that. We can say that we want to show our grid, but also just know that when we are in the main working screen, if we click on that grid icon, we can also hide it or show it from there as well. We can change the color of the grids here, and that's also quite helpful because, you know, most of the time when we have inserted a chart, the grid is going to be a black or a dark gray. And so, you know, you might want to just change some of these colors. You might want your major lines to be a bright green, for example. And we could say okay for that. For the minor lines, we might want to change them from gray to something that's a little bit different. You know, this can just be customized to whatever is useful for you and the way that you are going to be working. Again, we can change our background colors as well as our hoop size through this same options menu, and the way we got there was through the settings button up on the top toolbar. You do need to say okay if you've made any changes, and voila, look at that. Quite a bit of a messy looking screen, isn't it? How do we ever zoom in on this? You're going to notice that I'm using the scroll on my mouse and nothing happens. I think a little picture of a mouse comes up when I do this on the screen. When we want to zoom in on this program, we need to use the plus button here where the magnifier is. It's called a zoom box. And then we can drag our left mouse button and it will zoom in on our chart just like we need it to. All right, you're going to also notice, if you're looking closely at what I've got going on here, that my grid does not match up with the chart grid. And there's a way that we can fix that. But before we do that, let's go ahead and start off by a new program. I'm just going to go ahead and hit my piece of paper in the upper left-hand corner to start off with a new project. This is the default, remember. It's going to come up with the last hoop that I actually used. I think it does that every time. I could be mistaken about that. So I am going to come up to my settings. I'm going to change my fabric display right away to my white background because it will not save it. It will always go back to the default of gray. And I will say OK. So there's a couple of different ways that we can acquire our chart to work on. And I do definitely have a couple of preferences. But the nice thing about this program is that if you have a scanner attached to your printer, and today most printers do have a scanner attached to them, what you can do is you can get your cross stitch magazine or your chart that you probably already own. You can set it up and go and set it down on the flatbed of your scanner. Try to get it on there as straight as possible. And then you can hit your scan picture icon that's here on the screen. And when we do that, our scanner setting is going to come up. We can try to expand this window as much as we can. And then at this point we can say, you know, what kind of a picture did you just put on your scanner? Was it a color picture or was it a grayscale or a black and white? So you would start off by doing that. And then mine is a color picture that I happen to have on my scanner right now. The next thing I suggest that you do is adjust the quality of the scan picture and take this resolution here up to 600 dpi. All right, and then we can say OK. The next thing that we would do on our scanning thing is probably go ahead and hit the preview button. Sometimes this takes a little bit of time, and some scanners are going to be a little bit faster than others. This is one of the things that I find that I don't like so much when I'm using this particular part of the app. And that is, you know, we can go ahead and we can try to resize this image a little bit to get rid of all of these things that we don't want as part of our scanned image. Now, the reason why we don't want them is because when we are actually working with a scanned image, we really only want to have the size of the grid that we actually need for the design. I'll explain a little bit more about that in a little bit. But what we can do here is we can go ahead and grab these little bars, and we can try to get rid of most of the extra stuff that's here that we are not going to need as part of our design. And then we can say scan. And when we do that, you know, again, this will depend on your own scanner. 600 dpi takes a little bit of time to scan in. Sometimes it's a little faster than others. But what we will find when the picture actually comes up on screen is that it didn't exactly crop it like I wanted it to crop. It's still going to have a lot of excess border around the outside of that design. So let's just wait on this for a couple of more seconds. Hopefully it won't take too much longer. All right, here we go. When it finally gets going, it actually finishes the last part of it pretty quickly. Okay, so my image is now here in my screen, and just like I was trying to say a little while ago, I'm going to get rid of the background grid. You can see that it didn't exactly crop it as close as what I wanted it to do. But there is another step that we can do at this point, and that is that we can go ahead and select the picture by hitting the big arrow in the upper left-hand corner and then selecting our picture. Now, at this point, you can see that we've got these resizing bars around here, but that does not do what we need it to do. What we want is we want to get rid of all of this extra stuff that's around our image that we don't need. These bars are not going to do it for us. So what I like to do at this point is, if I've scanned directly from this cross-stitch program, I like to hit the save icon over here that's in the left toolbar, and I like to give my design a name. This time I'm going to call it To Spring, and the reason why I'm calling it To is because I've already saved it once before, and I'm going to save the type here as a JPEG image. All right, and just make sure that where you're saving it at on your computer is something that you know you're going to be able to find again. So I will save it. And the next thing that I'm going to do is actually just click off of this. And I'm not going to use this image right now, okay? So what I will do is I'll just come up to the upper right-hand corner and I'm going to hit the little X in the box saying that I'm closing and I am not saving the changes to design 4. All right, I'm also going to close this one here. All right, so I've got a blank screen right now and I'll get set up for my next design. But in the meantime, I'm going to come down to my File Explorer and I'm going to be navigating around inside of my cross stitch folder, and in here I've got that design image saved. So here's the first one that I did a little while ago that I've already cropped. This next one's going to come up further up in the, it's right here, To Spring, and it's a JPEG. So what I'm going to do is open this up using my photo gallery app that comes in our computer. I'm going to open with Photo Gallery. All right, and the reason why I like to use Photo Gallery is because it gives me a really nifty way of being able to crop the image exactly like I want it. So one of the things you need to do is you first of all go ahead and count up on the original cross stitch chart how many blocks or stitches are actually in the width and also in the height of your image, and write that number down because later on that's going to come in handy when we're actually working with the image in the cross stitch program. So what I will do is under Edit and Organize, find my image, it's right here, double click on it so it's opened up here, and now I can crop it. So when I hit the crop button, you're going to see here, maybe a little bit difficult to see right now, but in here you're going to see an area that's a little bit whiter and brighter than the whole gray image, and we've got these little drag bars that we can zoom in on. So here we go, we can just use this little arrow and I'm going to drag my right side. If I zoom in on it, what I want you to look for is just keeping a little bit of this, the pixels that are right here in this line, a little bit less than, try to mimic about the size of this amount of pixel right there. And then just zoom out and zoom over to the other side of your design. Do the same thing over here. Use the little drag and drop arrow. Zoom in on it. Adjust it. All right, you get the idea of what I'm telling you to do. You just need to do that to all 4 sides of your design. So when you have it cropped to the size and the proportion of what you like, go ahead and hit your enter key and it will get rid of all that extra stuff that we didn't want around the side. One step I did forget to mention is the very first step that you actually need to do when you're here in your photo gallery and you begin to crop your image is to make sure that you actually hit the straighten button, because sometimes if your magazine or your image that you have on your scanner isn't exactly straight, the program will actually analyze it and straighten it out for you. So this will save your image in that same location that we already had saved it into. I'm just going to back up and just so that we know that my image has been saved. So here it is, and the other thing that you're going to see about it is it is upside down. So if that bothers you, you can go ahead and hit the rotate button here in Photo Gallery and rotate it to the orientation that you like it in. And again, it will save this image for you. Now your image is actually ready to use in your cross stitch program. So I'll come back down to it and I will now come back to my picture tab. This time what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a picture, and I'm going to be navigating around on my computer and I'm going to find my picture. It is a JPEG, so let's look for JPEGs. And there it is. Sometimes this takes a little while, and oftentimes I've also discovered that sometimes it just doesn't want to open and I need to actually save the picture once again with a different name. So I don't know why it's doing that right there, but let's see if it'll open up. Well, I couldn't get that other picture to open. I think it had too many colors in it, and so I've opened up this one instead. And I have counted the blocks, and this is going to have 71 wide by 67 high. So what I'm going to do next is I'm using my arrow button. I'm going to select this picture. We will right click on it, and in here in the dimensions we are going to put in those numbers of how wide, how many blocks wide it is, or spaces. So in this case it will be 71, and I'll just type these numbers in, and the height on this one is 67. Alright, and I will say OK, and it has now resized my block. If I were to turn my grid back on at this point and really zoom in on this design, we're going to see that the grid pretty much matches up perfectly with the grid that's on the screen, which is the 10 blocks per inch grid, as well as the grid that we've got selected here. So that's how we size the grid to work with our project. And then we would go ahead and go into our design tab, and we would begin to place our stitches. So I know that one of the things that I find very helpful in this program is that we can use our settings button and our thread colors and create our own thread chart for the project that we are working on. Now, most of the time when we're working on a cross-stitch design, the threads that are used in that design are DMC floss. And so what we do here is under our thread chart, we just simply select the DMC thread chart. Most of these charts that are in here, in fact probably all of them, are going to be the pre-built thread charts that come with the Hatch program. And DMC happens to be one of them. Now, I have come across a couple of times when I'm working on a thread chart with the DMC colors, and some of the colors are not in here. But it's easy to find just a substitute. So what I'll do at this point is that I will go ahead and follow the chart that came with the design, and I'll put those colors in the numerical order in the way that they are actually listed on the chart. So for example, I probably should have prepped this beforehand, but just let me give you an example of what I would probably do here. This is not going to be the same heart. I think it's this one here. Let's see. Yeah. So here under the PDF that came with this project, if we scroll on down to the bottom of it, this design was a really simple one. It only had 2 different colors in it, maybe, or very few. So what I would do here is I would just follow the symbol, and I would do them in the order that they are here in the chart. So this one being only 2, that's not a very good example. Let's pick something that was a little more complicated to show you. Confetti heart had probably, I think, 5 different colors that were in it. This was the thread chart down here. And so what I would do is this would be color number 1 with its symbol, color number 2, symbol, color, etc., etc. So usually what I do here at this point, if it's a PDF, I will go ahead, and if it's a fairly simple design, I'll just write down the notes on a piece of paper, and I have that next to me at my computer. So in this case, color 1 was 351, and that was the symbol for it, etc., etc. Okay, so what I'll do next is I will just pick my colors. So in this case, the colors were going to be, I would search for my DMC color number 351, and I'm going to assign it into slot number 1. So I'll just find it here. I can actually search for it in the little search box. I'll just type in 351. There it is right there, and I will assign it. And it's now in slot number 1. Color number 2 was 352, and it's just right here. So I will assign it into slot number 2. Color number 3 was 3689. You're getting the idea of what I'm telling you to do. And I will assign it into slot number 3. We have only 2 more colors to go. Type it in, assign it, and type in the last one. If you wanted to add in a few other colors just for possibly using on your outline stitches or something like that, that's perfectly acceptable as well. I think that I'll do that. In fact, I think I'll give myself another dark color and assign it. Maybe I'll do 2 of them just for fun. And then what we'll do is we're up to 7 colors here. So we will change the colors in our design up here to 7 colors. And then we would notice that there are only 7 colors in this design and in our thread chart. So we will then say OK. And when we come down here to our color chart that's down on the bottom of our screen on this toolbar, if we right click on it, here comes our thread chart. And when we do this, it actually pins it into the working screen. We can, and it will stay there during the entire time that we are working on this project, so we do not have to keep on coming down here to open up the color thread charts. And the same thing goes for this down here too for our digitizing one. If we go ahead and right click on it, that will also open our stitch styles, and it will also stay there if needed. And then we can just go ahead and start digitizing our design. Another thing I do like to do here is I use my zoom in box, and I just drag holding down my left mouse key and zoom in on the project as best that I can to get a good enough picture for what I want. This chart here that I've actually inserted as a demonstration isn't one that's actually very clear. And you'll find when you start scanning in your design charts that sometimes you might prefer one where the colors are showing. There might be other times when you might prefer a black and white chart where the symbols are more obvious. So that's going to be, you know, actually just up to you. If I were to start a new project here and go ahead and come to my pictures and insert a new picture, let's just say maybe I would have to get one that's already prepared. Here's one that's in black and white. You know, and I don't have it sized or anything like that, but what I'm going to do is just show you that sometimes, you know, you just might want one that's a little bit simpler to look at. I don't know if that's a good demo or not, but I'm sure you're getting an idea of what I'm telling you. So that's some of the tips to use when you're working with the cross stitch program. Again, you know, it's just going to kind of be a little bit of hit or miss, inserting and preparing your charts. One of the things that I did not talk about at all, but I'll mention it right now, is my actual preferred method for creating my charts, if it's coming from a PDF file that I've downloaded from the internet, is I have a program on my computer that's called Nitro Pro. And the nice thing about Nitro Pro is it will open up a PDF file, and it will turn an image, or it will turn, a PDF, which is a document type file. It will actually turn it into an image if I ask it to. This is where I actually get the best quality images for my projects. So what I would do here in this program is I've opened up this PDF, and then I can come to the Convert tab, and I can convert this to an image. So, you know, it's a whole other learning thing, but this comes in quite handy because I can choose the pages that I want to convert into images. You know, so typically when I'm working with this, I will pick maybe the color image first, and then I will also select one of the black and white ones, and I'll convert both of those, and then I'll decide later as I crop them which one is actually going to be the one I'll choose to use in the program. So again, this is just some of the tips on using cross stitch and experimenting with it to create some designs that actually look like you did them by hand, but take probably 1/10 of the time. Okay, that's it for now. Bye-bye.